Hey guys, welcome again to another edition of Learning with Rich. Okay, so in this topic, we're going to talk about IFC in Revit. Okay, so there's a lot of uh, things that you are heard about IFC lately, especially in Beam kickoff meeting, Beam coordination meeting, or whatever meeting is that has something to do with Beam. So all of you guys are talking about IFC. But what is it and what does it have to do with building information modeling? Okay, so if you're going to check out the Wikipedia to quote them, the IFC or Industry Foundation Classes data model is a neutral. Okay, so it's a neutral and open specification that is not controlled by a single vendor or group of vendors. Okay, so it is an object-oriented file format with a data model developed by Building Smart. Okay, Building Smart, that is the International Alliance for Interoperability. Okay, to facilitate the interoperability in the building industry, and is commonly used format for building information modeling. Okay, so what is it about IFC? So IFC is actually aiming to be a global standard for beam data exchange. Okay, because like for example, in our case, we are using Revit. Okay, so there are some instances. Let's say we have a project. We have our architect. They are using, let's say for example, ArchiCAD. Let's say, for example, we are the structural guy. We are using Revit, okay? And then there's this another team. They are using Tekla, okay? So there's a lot of BIM tools that you can actually use. So to send it to your interior team, let's say, for example, who is using ArchiCAD, so you've got to use IFC for them to be able to open the file in Revit. So let's say, for example, I'm using Revit. So for them to be able to see this model or link this model to their project, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this to uh, IFC so that those people who are using ArchiCAD, they'll be able to see my model. Okay, it might also be sent to our engineers who are using Tekla. So before the IFC standard file type, this would have been a nightmare, right? Because all of you are talking about different software like Revit, ArchiCAD, Tekla, okay? So it's not that simple. So IFC aims to solve this problem so that it won't matter so much, okay? So that's why most of the time, the the file exchange, the data format that they are requiring is through IFC. Okay, it's because of this issue because some of us are using different software. Okay, but currently here in the country that I'm working on, so most of them are using Revit. That's why it's not that too difficult to collaborate with them. But then again, there are still other company that is using other software. Okay, so right now I have opened the sample Revit structural project. Okay. So in Revit, you can export Revit building information modeling to the IFC file format. What is IFC again? It is the Industry Foundation Classes. Okay, so this is maintained by Building Smart, so don't forget that. So IFC provides an interoperability solution between different software applications. So the format establishes international standards to import and export building objects and their properties. So if you're using IFC, it improves actually the communication, the productivity, delivery time, and quality throughout the life cycle of a building. It actually reduces the loss of information during the transmission from one application to another. Okay? So it establishes standards for common objects in the building industry. Right. So Revit and IFC, so the Revit provides fully certified IFC import and export based on the Building Smart IFC data exchange standard. So if you're going to the insert tab, you can see here there's a link IFC. So it links an IFC file to the current project to reference its information for additional design work. So let's say, for example, one of the team in the structural side, they are using Tekla. So what they can do for me to be able to see their design, they need to export their file to IFC. Then here in my Revit, I'm going to link that as an IFC. All right? Okay. So for export, you go to the file here. There's an export here. You can see there's the IFC. So for export, Revit supports the following standards. So we have different standards of IFC like IFC 4, IFC 2 by 3, IFC 2 by 2. Okay, so we're going to talk about that later. Okay, so the Revit IFC exporter is actively updated. Okay, it's actively updated to contain new functionality and bug releases on a regular basis. So you need to update your your exporter. So you can download it from the Autodesk App Store. Okay, so they need to be downloaded and installed manually. So another thing, when you export a Revit BIM to IFC format, the information can be used directly by other building specialists. Let's say, for example, the structural, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, sanitary, those building services engineers. Okay, so let's say, for example, building information models developed with Revit are saved to the RVT file format. So you can export the building model using the IFC format to an IFC certified application that does not use the Revit file format. So drawing can be opened and work on in non-native application. Okay, so similarly in Revit, you can import an IFC file, create a Revit file, and work on the building model with Revit, which is actually what we are using. Okay, so IFC uses architecturally meaningful containers to describe the real world building objects. Okay, so just a tip, advanced users may want to modify the IFC export code. Okay, we are going to talk about that later. Okay. Now, another thing, what are the IFC classes that Navisworks, I mean the Revit is using? Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, so what are the IFC classes that they are using? So these are just some example. So I'm going to show you this one. So these are the supported IFC classes available for use in the IFC export mapping file, and with the IFC export as shared parameters. So these are the supported IFC classes. Actually, there's a lot of supported IFC classes that you can find later on. Okay, so you will learn that also. So I'm going to close now this one. Okay. All right. So another thing in Navisworks, I mean in Revit, I always keep on saying Navisworks because I just finished the tutorial in Navisworks. Okay. Anyway, another thing between Revit and IFC. Okay, you can load and modify an IFC mapping file. So you can map the generic family instances to IFC containers, the one that just now I show you. So you can do this by creating a new IFC mapping file or editing an existing one. So you can also use the following procedure, which is what I'm going to show you, to load the desired IFC mapping file before exporting a Revit project to IFC. Okay, so how to load and modify an IFC mapping file? So what you can do, you can go to the file, and then you can go to the options. Oh, I mean export, sorry. File, export, and then you can go to the options here. There's the IFC options. Okay, and then this is now the IFC export classes dialog box. So if you want to create a new IFC mapping file based on the default mapping, so you can use the standard here. You can click standard. So the Revit will create an IFC mapping file named export layers dash IFC dash IAI .txt, .text. Okay, so if you're going to select standard. So again, if you want to create a new IFC mapping file based on the default mapping, you can use standard. Okay, so let's say for example, you have an existing mapping file, so you can use the load here. Okay, click the load, and then after that, you just navigate the file and click open. Okay, so you can do that. So as you can see, each row here in the dialog represents an element. Okay, element category or subcategory. Right? So for standard building elements, an assigned class name appears in the class name, this one, the IFC class name column. So for building elements that do not have automatic mapping to IFC export classes, the value displayed in the IFC class name column is not exported, just like this one. Okay? So it's not exported. Why is that? Okay, when you see not exported, so these are for the building elements that do not have automatic mapping to IFC export classes. So that's why they have not exported. But as you can see, okay, so you already have other types here. Okay, IFC class. Okay, so to save the settings, you can just select save as here. All right, so this is actually what you can do to load and modify an IFC mapping file. All right. Okay, so I'm now going to cancel this one. So that is for the option. Okay, that is the option to load and modify an IFC mapping file. So let's say, for example, you want to export a project to IFC, like this model. Okay, you want to export that model. So you can save a project as an IFC file for use with an IFC certified application, like for example, Tekla, Revit, ArchiCAD. Okay, okay. So Tekla, it doesn't use RBT file format or ArchiCAD also. So you can export it. Okay, so where to export? So from the file here, you can select export. You can see here export IFC. Okay, so this one. So you can see here the export IFC. Okay, all right. So in the export IFC dialog, so as you can see the file name here, where do you want to save it? So you can navigate to the target folder for the IFC file. And then after that, you enter the name for the IFC file, then you can save it. Okay. So for the current selected setup, you will see here that in session setup is selected. So this option is a modifiable setup, which is not saved between session. So you can actually configure the options as desired to export the project to IFC. So there are actually multiple built-in setups here. So these setups correspond to the IFC value or IFC version options. Okay, so these setups cannot be modified, okay, or deleted, but they can be duplicated to create a customized version. Okay, so these are the different setup in exporting your IFC. All right. So optional, you can actually select here modify setup to customize the IFC setup option. So this one. Okay. So you can customize this one. So the modify setup dialog display. So you can modify the in-session setup or add additional name setups using the create or duplicate options. Okay. Right. Okay. So these are the different options that you can use to modify your IFC. Okay, so that's it for now. So on our next topic, so let us try to talk about these settings that we can see on our modify setup in the export IFC. Okay, so this is the bird's eye view in IFC. Okay, so hopefully this has been helpful to you guys. Hopefully I gave you enough information in IFC. So in our next exercise, so let's continue our topic about IFC. All right? Thank you for watching, guys, and have a nice day.